It's book review! Hello everyone, welcome to the first book review on this channel. Today we're going to be reviewing the book, The Rodale Book of Composting, published by the Rodale Press in 1992. I found this book to be very informative, having a lot of breadth on various topics from what you can compost, earthworms, the types of structures you can use, and so much more. I think this book is perfect for the intermediate gardener. If you're a beginner gardener, this book is also great. There's so much to learn, but because of that, it could feel like a long read. Now, this book's not a step-by-step guide on how to compost. I saw a couple criticisms on other forums describing how people took this more as a treatise to composting rather than an actual guide. However, in some ways, I disagree. I think it provides you all the information you need to compost and to really get a good understanding of what's going on when you compost and what happens when you mix that with your soil. This book emphasizes compost as being the single most important task an organic farmer or gardener can use to make their soil more fertile. Compost improves soil texture and soil structure, qualities that enable soil to retain nutrients, moisture, and air control for the support of a healthy ecosystem. It also helps plants release nutrients, protect against drought, and control pH. The definition I got from this book of compost is the process of breaking down organic materials due to microorganisms to create a fertilizer to propagate growth of plants in the amended soil. The book describes the process as, at the beginning of composting, medium temperature or mesophilic bacteria and fungi predominate. So what I mean by that is these are bacteria that thrive in these medium temperature environments, and they will then gradually give way to thermophilic or high temperature bacteria. So why do these temperatures get hot? Well, the book describes it is that these microorganisms are breaking down the materials, and as a byproduct, they are releasing heat. Once stability approaches in temperature, Actinomycetes and fungi that have been on the outer edges of or the cooler areas of your compost pile will then start to dominate the environment or the compost. So here's some quick facts about compost that I got. Your ideal carbon to nitrogen ratio is between 25:1 or 30:1. It helps mitigate high temperature changes in the soil. The more frequently you turn the pile, the faster the decomposition is of the compost. Most compost systems are aerobic, meaning air flows freely through them. Tips for those who have a compost drum: turn it every day for the next 2 weeks and your compost should be complete. Bacteria become dormant below 55 degrees Fahrenheit or 13 degrees Celsius. Your compost should stay above that in freezing weather. Your compost pile should be at least 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, which is about the width of this. The more diverse the ingredients, the better. The best way to inoculate your compost with good bacteria is throw a little sprinkle of topsoil on top. Composting is a last in, first out process. Most of the time. The time needed to finish your compost is generally between 2 to 8 weeks. Speed depends on how high of an aeration you have in your composting pile. The best way to check if your compost is working is by checking that temperature. Sandy soils are rebuilt with compost. The fungi that fed on plant roots bound soil particles into aggregates. Earthworms also helped create soil aggregates. These aggregates were made stable by mobile humic acid compounds formed during the active breakdown of organic matter. Organic matter improves the quantity and quality of the aggregation. All of this is then broken down by the bacteria. Humus increases root penetration as well. It's got action. Air is vital to compost and soil. I'm sure you heard me talk about it throughout this review. Without air, soil becomes alkaline. Increased air helps the intake of potassium, and air helps the formation of microalgae. The amount of moisture in the heap should be as high as possible for the aerobic bacteria. Your principal nutrients for bacteria, actinomycetes, and fungi are carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Remember guys, the composting process is broken down into two phases. The mesophilic, which is the medium range temperatures of 50 to 113 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 to 45 degrees Celsius. And the thermophilic, which is the high temperatures, really hot, 113 to 158 degrees Fahrenheit or 45 to 70 degrees Celsius. Those are some pretty hot temperatures. Bacterial decomposers really like pH between 6 and 7.5. Your fungal decomposers like 5.5 to 8. That's a pretty wide range. Colloidal or tiny humus particles have a negative charge. This attracts positive elements such as potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium, iron, and copper. Woody and fibrous materials such as bark, sawdust, wood chips, straw all have a dry weight absorption of 70 to 85%. Lime is used to raise pH. Leave a comment below if you know what's used to decrease pH. So maybe you've heard me say actinomycetes before. Well, what is an actinomycete? Characteristically, it's that earthy smell of newly plowed soil in the spring. This is caused by them. They are higher form bacteria similar to fungi and molds. They are especially important in the process of forming humus. These things are incredibly important, and there's so much to know about them that there's not enough time in this video to cover it, so go check them out for further information. So what are the types of organisms you can find around the rhizosphere or that an ecosystem near or in the soil? You can find mites, millipedes, centipedes, snow bugs, snails or slugs, spiders, springtails, beetles. Don't forget about the ants, flies, nematodes, flatworms, rotifers, earthworms. There's so much, and there's so much more to be discovered. Now this book got in a lot of depth about earthworms. They are incredibly helpful with compost, they say. Again, if you live in the city and you're afraid of those smells or anything, composting, they said, really isn't a smelly process if done correctly, and earthworms help that even more. Something really interesting I found from this book about earthworms was they can release up to 5 to 11 times more NPK than what they ate available in the soil. The best way to balance micronutrients is to compost varieties of organic materials. Macronutrients are those needed in abundance in soil. Micronutrients are those lesser but still important nutrients in soil. Compost should not be used with trees and shrubs. Check out the ring method if you want to know more. This book I really thoroughly enjoyed. It gave a lot of information that I was looking for. There's still so much more that I didn't even cover in this book. They really get into the real numbers of like what's going into the soil. The only gripe I might have is that this book is fairly dated, and I think that there might be newer information or newer materials out there. For instance, I saw there's a book called The Compost Handbook by Jane Bilbert. But regardless, I don't think much has changed, and this book is excellent. Again, if you're intermediate or beginner, read this book. All right, guys, happy gardening. Leave a comment if you like, subscribe. I'll catch you all later.